Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Daniel D'Addario from Variety. Before we are joined by our guests today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Molly Shannon, Heléne Yorke, and Drew Tarver of the other two. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so all episodes of the other two are now available to stream on HBO Max, and this season shows the two siblings taking a more active role in their lives and a more active role in taking part in the entertainment industry. Drew and Heléne, to start, do you find that that kind of forward momentum gave you new notes to play as opposed to season one?
Drew?
Yeah. I mean, like it was interesting for, season one, these characters are really struggling, and they're getting with their whole sort of lives change when their little brother becomes, a huge star, and they're sort of flailing around. And in the second season, I feel like we got to, sort of play around with what does it feel like for them to get a little bit of success, and how does that feel? And does it fix them? So there was some fun sort of what does it look like? What does success look like or feel like on these characters?
What was fun too is that I think they start to experience a little bit of success. And what was a fun note to play is that it's never exactly what you think it's going to end up being. You sort of have these expectations. I'm going to get to this place and it's going to garner more success for me, or I'm going to feel that I've arrived in some way, but you're still feeling like a bit of a dumpster fire all the time. We keep saying these characters, the goalpost keeps getting moved for them. So that was a fun note to play within the season for sure, as their lives expand and they have a little something.
Well, it's true for all three characters as well, because Molly, your character Pat, who is the mother of this kind of pop superstar and her other two children, has a daytime talk show that is in some ways more than she ever could have wanted, but it's also this kind of backbreaking work. She's never not in the studio or doing 18 million promotional things. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about playing Pat as a talk show host, because she has such a good-hearted, big energy, and you feel like she can never say no to trying to make it a success.
Mm-hmm. I think she didn't really know what she was getting into. It's she doesn't know because she's never done it. So she has no idea at all. And she does want to, she wants to make everyone happy, and she ends up really kind of burning herself out. But I think she didn't quite know what she was getting into, really what it takes to do that, successfully.
I mean, that's kind of the show's take on the entertainment industry in general, right? Is that we have this family that kind of enters into it not knowing just what it's going to be, whether it's the amount of work or, as you said, Heléne, the degree to which it's always a new disappointment every time you think you've reached the goal. That's where a lot of the show's humor comes from, but it's interesting that it never feels overly cynical to me. It never feels like it's burning the industry down. It's done with a real kind of big-hearted love of all these crazy hoops they have to jump through, to my eye. Is that something that drew you to it?
Yeah, I think what it makes this show different and successful in that vein is that Chris and Sarah wrote a piece about a family that really loves each other instead of a bunch of people that want to tear each other down all the time. And that's the heart that it keeps returning to. And I think why we hope people respond to it so well is that it's refreshing that it doesn't have biting cynicism. It's cynical, but with love, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That must be an interesting balance to strike from the performing side of it too, though, because Drew and Heléne, you both play characters who are kind of constantly scheming, trying to get ahead, and, not evil or truly cynical by any means, but just kind of like very willing to try out crazy schemes in order to inch one space forward on the game board. Yet there is still that core of love there. What kind of went into building that relationship that you all have with each other as performers?
I think that, really we didn't know one another before we started shooting. So you really do get to know one another on set and talking in between setups. And so I think that that's the way you get to know one another. And then you try to pour that into the work too. Me playing the parent of Heléne and Drew. And so what about you guys?
I mean, I think also, Heléne and I both have siblings, and we have a lot of love for our siblings, and Heléne is very lovable. And it is kind of these, you're in these situations where you are scheming and you are trying to get ahead, but you keep coming back to sort of that base relationship with your family and being protective of them. So it has this sort of heartwarming aspect while you are sometimes the characters are being straight up monsters.
I think something also is that with siblings and with families is that no matter how high they're flying or how low they are, you know them so deeply and you understand where to meet them wherever they are. And I think that that's something that this show does really well. Like even if Carrie's doing super great, Brooke knows that he's probably showing up at Kettle of Fish and like trying to pitch himself as being this fancy person to total strangers. And like to know that that's where somebody actually is like, you both love your siblings for that, but also hate them so much that they can't like let you be this thing. And so I think that honesty within family is something that it hits really well on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you, especially with both of the siblings, I mean, all three of your characters are kind of testing out romantic relationships in different ways this season and kind of figuring out what you do and don't want within that context. And Heléne and Drew, your characters really do keep each other honest in terms of kind of both of you trying to set out on your own in new ways. I really thought that the way both of those plot lines developed was really interesting. And I wondered if we could start with Drew and talk a little bit about just the depiction of a young gay man kind of like on Bambi legs, like trying to experiment with relationships and more often seeing what he wasn't interested in. I mean, did you have any like input into the storyline, and what did you think of it as it developed?
No, I mean, like I'm not a writer on it. So like, I didn't pitch anything, but I feel like for the most part, Carrie is, he came out later in life. So he's kind of dealing with this delayed adolescence in a way. And, but his age is like, oh, I need to be in a relationship to be, a success or whatever. That will show that I've conquered all of my issues. And I think in the first season, he's dealing with a little, internalized homophobia towards him, and dating his or hooking up with his straight roommate. And he's trying to get out of that situation. And then in the second season, he's like, okay, I'm out of that. I'm all better now. But he gets in, to another relationship that he's sort of like, oh, maybe there are some stones unturned in my sort of like development, and I want to see what else is out there. So he's kind of, trying to figure out what he likes later in life, which I think is like a little bit of a struggle for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting that all three of your characters in different ways also deal with this feeling of, am I not quite right? Am I doing stuff the right way? This came to mind as I was preparing for this panel, thinking about the episode in which Heléne is on a panel discussion of her own, the kind of conversation about accomplished women and feminism, and is so consumed by this feeling of being an imposter. I'd be curious to discuss like if that rang true for any of you watching it or acting it in your case, Heléne, just this feeling of kind of like, okay, how did I get here and what's going on? And am I saying the right thing?
Yes, it did. Thank you for asking that question. I think even sitting on a panel, like this is, I still feel like, why would anybody want to hear what I have to say about my work or what I'm doing? Why is that so interesting? Why is that of value? And to, and what I love about that episode is that it ends with her having a sweet moment, realizing that she has gotten somewhere, even though she thinks that she's struggling and flailing. And I think that's universal. It's insane to me in the current landscape that everybody, I think maybe it's social media that gives this aspect that everybody can be like fully eloquent on any topic and be, centrally confident in who they are and what they're communicating. And I'm like, what? And I think that's something that makes the story relatable as well. Just this, yes, I think imposter syndrome is something that everybody deals with. I think it's, and yes, I guess I'm just saying that, like, yes, I do relate to that.
But all of the characters in their own way, right, have this feeling. I mean, Pat is on her talk show with the biggest heart, but talking about subjects that she's not really sure about until Brooke speaks into her ear. And Carrie really wants to be an actor, but his agent is only booking him cameos, which is to say, paid appearances on other people's behalf using the app Cameo. And obviously, Heléne, you just spoke eloquently to Brooke's situation. It's interesting that all of you have this kind of shared experience as your characters do, and yet there seems at times to be something holding you all back from your characters back from talking to each other really frankly about it. There's a lot of love, but sometimes I feel like you're each kind of trapped in your own experience, which is why the way the season comes together in the end is really nice for me. Without spoiling it too much, can you guys talk about where you had wanted the season to go and where it ends up?
Well, I was going to say, for my character, I'm in a new relationship, so I have to have those boundaries with my kids about, I'm not really saying till later that, look, he's driving me crazy. I'm just stressed out. I don't have time to like give to everyone. So for me, my new relationship, my chapter 2, my relationship with Streeter is like a real rebirth for me, because I was in a codependent marriage with an alcoholic before my character Pat. So this is like a real, like, she's in love. It's exciting. Her children are flourishing and she's doing her show. So she doesn't really want to say all what's going on because she can't, because she's the mom, but in the end, she can't really hold it all in it, not to give anything away, but it kind of explodes out, expressing herself and telling the kids what's really going on, and Streeter and everything like that.
Yeah. And I think like with the, there is like a rivalry in a way, like between the siblings and the family, because certain people are getting, their big break or whatever, and others aren't, or it's going back and forth of who, is successful at the moment. And I think they're each trying to be like, I need to get my thing, I need to make sure I'm okay while I balance also being a part of this family and wanting what's best for everyone. And I think like occasionally it's those two feelings are at odds.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a nice culmination to see all of these characters kind of diverge for various reasons. And, again, not wanting to give too much away, how, these forces ultimately all result in them having to come to terms with where they are. And yeah.
Yeah, it's nice when all of that all of that sort of secrecy, or a little bit of when all of that drops at the end of the season and everybody has to be honest with each other and like, this is how you're making it's like, it's like nobody's talking about their stuff and it saves up until the end. What am I? Basically, nobody's going to therapy.
I think episode 10 is like my favorite episode of the season, actually, because you watch these characters in context that you're not used to seeing them over the course of the first 9 episodes.
Yeah.
Is they finally drop into their own bodies and you're kind of, you feel like you see them for the first time.
Yeah, it's occasional, like in episode
and focus, which is cool and great. And yeah.
Like in episode 10, they're like, hey, remember what you did to me in episode 2? Let's talk about that.
Well, it's funny to obviously the characters you play are complicated, but in a sense, they're kind of multiple characters in one, because there's the real selves that they are in their most unvarnished selves around family. And then there are these fronts they put up, whether it's the perfect mom and being beamed into American homes for an hour every weekday, or just the successful talent manager or the successful actor. There's kind of all these fronts that get stripped away. And I imagine that must have been really rewarding to get to play both sides of that.
Yeah. I have to say something about this. It's just making me think about this, is that now that we're in the biz and you meet fancy people a lot, there's this idea or this misconception, I think, is from seeing it from the outside, this like flashy persona that everybody is. And then ultimately when you meet people, they're people. And I think that's what this show does well, is they're people with failings, they're selfish, they divert from the things that are really important in life. And I think that that's why it's like a peeled onion in a way. Look at the industry, as it were, of like, oh, these people have it totally together. Like I went on a deep dive of Justin Bieber the other day and I was like, is this marriage really that great? Like, how would you know? You know what I mean? I'm like dragging Justin Bieber on Saturday channels. Justin and Haley, are they really doing well? And I think that that's what's fun about it. That's what's relatable about it in a way.
Yeah. When you met me, you were like, oh, you're just a normal guy.
Yeah, I was like, who's this very fancy fellow? Us Weekly, he's just like us.
Well, and also just the sibling rivalry of it all. I mean, your characters could ascend to the absolute highest heights, be more famous than Chase Dreams, and you would still have the same insecurities, the same foibles, the same hangups, the same things you can't get past. Like, even that little bit of success, like, doesn't make it go away. If anything, it intensifies it a little. But that's kind of been really satisfying for people who watch the first season, or if you go back and watch the first season, that in the second season, your characters, the situations have changed, but they're not like radically reinvented by fame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like these characters go through, humiliating moments in season 1. And then when you add a little bit of fame, the sting of that humiliation is a little bit more intense, so it's nice to get to play that of like, hey, this success sometimes equals, a little bit more of a sting or more of a hurt sometimes when you fall on your face.
I was talking to someone and they compared the other two to me to Succession, in the sense that I can't claim credit for this. And if it sounds totally crazy, I'll take it to them. So don't blame me. But they were like, every episode, one of the siblings is up and one of the siblings is down. The difference is they're not really fighting with each other. They're going after different pieces of the pie, but like their fortunes rise and fall. Mm-hmm. And I think that gives a really interesting dynamic that you two, Heléne and Drew, are providing a lot of loving support to each other. There's also a little bit maybe of joy when one of you is the one who can kind of look down from above and be pitying. And obviously, Molly, you're kind of overseeing them both as the mom. It's a really rich family dynamic that you guys have, and really cleverly written in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I've been walking around on the street screaming the other two is the new Succession for years. But yeah,
I was going to say too, I think Chris and Sarah are so, definitely use parts of themselves, obviously, in the writing of the characters, but they're so particular, really mapping out the whole thing. And if they don't feel it's right, they'll scrap it and start over. I mean, they are real perfectionists in thinking, putting those puzzle pieces together before they're ready to shoot. So I just think, and then of course, like everyone already said, at the end of the day, it's always family at the center, which is an interesting thing, how that makes it all kind of come together, that they care and love one another so much.
Mm.
And you touched on this earlier, Molly, and sorry.
That's okay. I have the giggle. Oh yeah, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say I think that dynamic is human. It's deeply human to be happy if you're doing well, and I'm so sorry to be like weirdly satisfied when somebody isn't.
Yeah.
Am I saying that's deeply human, or is that just because I'm a sociopath?
Yeah, it's deeply human. It's this thing I do all the time and everyone else does too, right?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I don't want people to not think this is a comedy in emphasizing this, but I do want to just bring it back to something that Molly, you mentioned earlier, which is that these characters have this tough history together. Dad was passed away. Mm-hmm. Drew, your character is kind of still dealing with the fact that he never really saw you for who you were. And yet it seems to have brought them even closer together. And I think there's something really interesting and even joyful in that there is this togetherness, not uncomplicated, that comes out of really tough history that you guys share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of really heavy themes in this show with very funny specifics laid on top of them. But as an actor, you always have that sort of human emotion to go back to, to help these jokes land. There's always this sort of depth to it, which Chris and Sarah do so well. And it's just such a fun show to get to play, these bigger comedy moments and some sort of the show will just slam to a halt and there'll just be a really nice emotional moment. And then, the jokes will continue. It's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needle is really well thread. Actually, you brought up our dad is in the episode with the Twink and Daddy, not Twink and Daddy. Oh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, is at the end, Drew gives such a sweet performance to the actor's name is Tuck, and he gives this sweet performance of basically placing his father on this person. And so you'll go on this wild ride where they're doing all this ridiculous shit and they're at, the big gay ice cream, and you realize where that really comes from. And then how they pulled us back out of that moment, I thought was so well done. And I think that that's Chris and Sarah's writing, but then also Drew's performance, which is so impactful in that moment. And it was the same with Molly in season 1 in episode 9, when she's talking about how her husband died on a plane. It's deeply true, but hilarious. Mm-hmm. And so it's this it's to constantly tread that line. And I think that's what this show does really well, and what Chris and Sarah and the writing do well, and these two wonderful actors.
Mm-hmm. And the comedy is always so much better when it's anchored in that emotional truth, because then you have that as the base, but then you can go off. But I think it makes the comedy so much richer. Yeah. Because there is that emotional truth underneath and that drama and seriousness. And then I think it does allow you to go to these super funny places, but come back to the love.
Heléne, you were just really generous in pointing out two scenes that you thought your co-stars did really well. And I wanted to bring up one that I thought you did really excellent in an excellent performance across the board, which was the episode that kind of begins with you landing that dream apartment that you once kind of woke up in on an air mattress. And now it is your big, glorious own apartment. And yet, for all that, at the episode's end, we see that you're realizing that it wasn't all it's cracked up to be. It's okay, it's all right, but it's not solving all your problems. And I thought that rang really true and interesting. And it was a note I was surprised to see kind of dawn on Brooke, because she's a character for whom it seemed like once she got these few things, then she'd be set and she'd convince herself it was good to go. But I thought that was really complicated, great work. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about your character in that moment.
That's really nice. Thank you. I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think, and I've done this as well. And, life as a New Yorker and an actress living in this town, and the ups and downs of your career and moments of success and moments of not success is oftentimes I feel like you fill your life with noise, you fill it with a bunch of stuff. And so your day is just like noise, stuff, like climbing. And then it's in the quiet moments where you're alone that you can take stock of where you really are, as opposed to being confused because, you're looking for something or hoping something will happen for you, or, having expectations for something that fall short. And again, I think it's a universal idea, right? That you will get something and then therefore all of your problems will be solved. You'll have this idea of like, oh, I'll get that thing. And then once I get there, everything will be perfect and good, but you still have all your like shit in a backpack that you carry with you anywhere you go. And I think that that's what makes that moment really interesting. Like sometimes I think about it like, these big rock stars. Have you ever been at a concert and I'll like see this person that I worship on stage, but then they still go home to a quiet apartment, and like, what's that moment like?
When the applause dies down.
Yeah. And like, do they have people they can turn to, or is it just like the entourage, all these people, all this shit all the time? And then, quiet moment. I think about that sometimes, and, where people actually are. And I think that people are really hard on, this idea that like celebrity, rich people, whatever, like need to be happy all the time, should be fine with all these things happening. This is totally a diversion from the Brooke thing, but I just think as an idea, is that, you're allowed to be human and things are still, I think it's really like your shit's still in your backpack. Comes with you. That's what I want the quote to be, the theme of that whole rant.
Do you find that as more and more people watch this show and respond to it, do you find that it has been an interesting kind of tension or interaction with the subjects of the show, that now you may be getting noticed more, and people are really excited about the performance you're giving and excited potentially to meet you? Is that something that you're experiencing?
I love that. So anybody who wants to come up to me and talk to me, because, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but, there are moments where I thought like, damn, I've been hitting it hard and like, I'm about to get super recognized for this thing. And I love it and I'm killing it. And then like, my best example is I was doing a show on Broadway and I was like, I'm going to win a Tony Award. And I was so positive I was perfect. I read the New York Times review like at 3 a.m. in the cab home from opening night, and they ripped me apart. And I was just like, and I think that it's moments like that that make, people liking something that you're doing so cool and great, because, these moments are sometimes fleeting. And so yes, I love it when people want to tell me that they like it.
Yeah, it's been really nice. People have been like really nice. And it's so nice when you work so hard on something and then people watch it and like it. It means so much. It's really nice. I mean, occasionally it is strange when you're like, when somebody recognizes you like in a coffee shop, and then you both like, you're after the interaction, you're still both there, and you're like, okay, now how do I act? Like, how do I sort of, who am I when people know me? Like, how do I drink the coffee? Very strange.
You know who's great at getting recognized and is amazing about it is Molly Shannon.
Oh, really? Well, thank you, Heléne. Well, I feel like I've been around the block a lot, so I do appreciate it because I know it doesn't happen that much where you have, good writing with the timing and people watching. It's not that easy. So I think when it does all come together, I really appreciate it. And I think like when I was first on Saturday Night Live, I used to have people come up to me and they would compliment me and I would be like, oh, thank you so much. I would, but then I would get kind of dark. Like I would look for like a problem in the compliment. So I think because I've been around for a long time, I've learned to stop doing that. I was like, you know what, just enjoy it. This is so special. And so I feel like I have more experience with dealing with it. But I used to be kind of bad. Like I would turn a compliment dark and look for trouble in the compliment. Isn't that weird?
Yes.
It is weird.
It's not weird. I do that same thing.
Yeah.
Not me, I take it. I love it.
Oh, you like the show? Do you not love the show?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it all goes back to that dark stuff, which can give people that drive to make it. I think a lot of comedians do come from a darker place, which is why they had that drive to be like, look at me, mommy. Or, that doesn't happen by accident, that there are a lot of like, whatever, superstar girls whose fathers died when they were, 4, or whatever. We're going off on a dark tangent,
Thinking about these themes and getting us to a landing place, I'm wondering, given that your characters are all feeling similar things, what do you hope lies ahead for them? In if there are to be many future seasons, what do you hope lies ahead for Pat, Carrie, and Brooke as they kind of grapple with these same emotions that you're feeling and so many people have dealt with?
You guys want
to? I mean, I think like, I think like them being in fancier situations, but also getting humiliated, like that, where these characters live. Like, I think it's interesting to see like sort of what their status will be and how they handle it in future seasons. But I think these characters live in sort of this like struggle. So I it sounds weird, but I hope they continue to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because I think that that's the universal thing, right? That the show does so well is that, it'll be fun. I think it'd be fun to see them continue to start to do really well and, have thriving businesses and be a successful actor and, whatever else. But, still be themselves within that. And I think that that's what the show does well. And I hope we get to continue doing it. And I hope that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I hope Pat can figure out how to stop being so polite to hurt herself and really, take care of herself in a better way so that she can be a better mom for her children. Because she hopefully she'll realize that like she's not going to be good to anyone if she's just burning herself out and just so sweet to everyone but herself. She can't be everything to everyone. So hopefully she'll continue growing in that way.
Well, that sounds like a very good note to leave things on and a good hope for the future. So on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.